Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the interview series with the authors of A Journey of Riches Finding Inspiration, Book 11. So I'm here with Dave MacArthur, an extraordinary human being. If you haven't checked out his podcast, make sure you do. Mechanic to Millionaire, it is next level. He was broke and unhealthy, unfulfilled as a mechanic to a healthy, fit, purpose-driven, multi-millionaire and seven-figure annual income earner. I just love that line. Fantastic. Dave is a devoted husband, father of 5 kids and a grandfather, an author, host of the number 12 ranked podcast, Mechanic to Millionaire by Inc. magazine, health advocate, educator, lecturer on universal laws and mindset and the human anatomy, specializing in Telomeres, the protective caps in the ends of chromosomes. Dave sees himself as an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and disciple of Christ. There is no finish line in life, no retirement. All things are possible to them that believe. Life is a continuous journey of growth, development, impact, and contribution, progress, and expansion. What if I want for myself, I want for everyone, to inspire creativity, independence, abundance, and the support and ability to see it through. Our past does not dictate our future, and principle triumphs precedence. More for all and less for none. May we continue onward and upward until at last we find that we have brought heaven to earth. Wow, that's just an amazing bio, Dave, and great to be chatting with you today.
That's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, John.
It's awesome. It's an absolute pleasure, and I loved your chapter. There's just so many nuggets of wisdom. It was just lined with gold. And one of the ones that really jumped out at me was protecting your focus. Protect your focus with your life, I think is what it said. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, guarding your focus with your life. It's, thought is energy, right? There's a lot of teachings out there about thought being energy. And we know that thought is a potent form of that energy. And when we can concentrate on focused thought, which is focused energy, there's power behind that. And a lot of people are thinking, but they're not thinking in a concentrated, very specifically designed way. They're kind of just reacting to things. I guess the closest people are getting to really having concentrated thought is when they set a goal. But most people, even in that case, set their goals in the wrong way and not understanding the principles behind that concentrated thought and the actions, the self-governing actions that come from the explanation and understanding of those principles, so that we have a more refined, guiding philosophy. And that only comes from learning and growing and understanding those principles. And that's what I was introduced to, which really, once I started implementing it, I didn't really question it, because at that time in my life, I was at the bottom of the barrel. And it's kind of like T. Harv Eker says, his life was a mess and he had tried everything else. And he said, I'd rather be really hokey and really wealthy than really cool and really broke, or really right and really broke. So life has a way of, if it's beating you up enough, it opens you up. So once I started changing the way I was behaving on a thinking level, based on what I was learning, and opened myself up to be able to learn, and when the student's ready, the teacher appears, everything started to change. And I found that change had started from within me, not from outside of me. And that's a very important place to get to, because then you can start to understand really what guarding your focus with your life really entails. So some people might think, well, I know what that means, guarding your focus. That sounds like great principle, but most people, unfortunately, don't really know what that means.
Very true, very true. It really jumped out at me. And I just recognized different areas in my life that I hadn't been guarding and protecting my focus. And it's, especially in this day and age, and you mentioned in your chapter as well, that we have so many different distractions. It's the best time to be alive, right? But it's the best time to be distracted. There's just so many different distractions.
Yeah. Yep. And,
yep.
So I thought I might have escaped me already, but just at that time in my life, and I just want to make very clear, our skills that we learn, like Will Smith, the actor, said, he's going to master his craft. He's going to really put forth the effort to learn the skills around the craft. So being a mechanic, I mastered my craft by experience and then wanting to do an excellent job. Also going to school to learn that craft from people who knew it better than I did. And I really did master the craft of mechanics. So I'm not going to downplay that. That's essential. But at that time in my life, like where I was literally praying for God to take my life because I was in survival mode to like, as far as I couldn't see myself going on living that way. And so here I was at a place in my life where I was either praying for God to take my life or help me find a solution, right? And there was a catalyst that caused the solution to come in. And it wasn't just prayer alone. It was me doing some actions that actually brought these things to me. And I believe that's part of prayer, right? It doesn't take away the problems. It shows you solutions that you can make decisions on, right? Yeah. It brings like I said, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Well, I was ready because of certain things that I was doing. But I just want to make very clear here, strategy and the skills and the daily methods of operation, how I was conducting myself wasn't enough. And I work with a level of excellence and a work ethic that I would say is exceptional. It's next to none. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day, putting excellence into everything I did. The only thing that was missing was these principles on the excellence up here, and that's where I was failing. So it didn't matter how hard I was working, how much integrity I had with that work, how much excellence. There was something missing that was getting me to reach those goals that I had set for myself. And once I found those, and Charles Hamill calls that the master key. Once you find that, everything starts to change, especially if you've already got the skill and the work ethic down, because that is essential as well. But it's incomplete. The work ethic alone is incomplete. And just one thing I'll add to kind of clarify that maybe a little bit is, like, let's say there's two businesses in the same city and they both have the same skill sets and the same clientele, and one of them goes bankrupt and another one just totally thrives. There's something unseen that's not happening there, and that's those principles, those more subtle principles that teach us the behavior of thinking. And that's what started to make the difference for me.
That is so poignant. It's just such a great point to make. And it also, that basically dovetails into the next question I wanted to ask you, was about another point that you were making that jumped out at me in your chapter, was that thinking is a behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about that? It just really jumped out at me. And I guess it really dovetails on what you've already said in a way.
Yeah, it kind of does. There's way more to it, right? Like, we're doing a podcast following a book, and we've been on the book for 7 years. It's only 24 chapters, right? So there's a lot that to it. But thinking is behavior, kind of on a more on a light-minded note. A lot of people need to be put into timeout because of their thinking behavior, right? And I don't know that everybody knows what timeout means, but here in our society, timeout is like, you need to go sit in the corner with your face in the corner because you've not been very good. Your behavior has been bad, right? So a lot of people do need to be put in timeout because of their thinking behavior. And they don't know it. They don't even realize that that's, a behavior. But thinking is, and behavior causes results. And that's the point that I wanted to get across when that came to me, that thinking's a behavior, is that behaviors always produce results. There's going to be a cause and effect from behavior. But these more subtle principles, like a principle that has a cause and effect with behavior would be the law of gravity. And everybody's pretty familiar with that because the contrast between living the law of gravity and breaking the law of gravity is so immediate. And it's so extreme. So you can see the contrast very clearly. And we've all experienced it. But gravity is non-personal. It's a principle and it's immutable. Nobody can change the law of gravity and its causes and effects, but it's non-personal. And this is where people get mixed up with good things happening to bad things happening to good people. But I would also say good things happen for bad people, right? So that's a non-personal thing. And I say the principle of cause and effect, God has so woven that into the universe that it's a part of everything we do. The car we drive, the clothes we wear, the job that we have, our happiness, our relationships, how much money we earn. So with, again, thinking as a behavior, once we start to once we're exposed to the principles, like we could go and study about the law of gravity and probably learn a lot more than we know about it, right? We could get our PhD, and it would take years and years to get that PhD in the principle of gravity. But we would learn a lot more, and we'd understand a lot more about it. And we could then probably go out and build an airplane correctly, right? Because we know that principle on that level. There are more subtle principles that have to do with every effect in your life, but they're different principles. They're on different spectrums, and we just have to be exposed to them and start to learn them. And then what we'll see as we learn them, we'll start to understand the erroneous way where we're breaking those principles. We're not in harmony with them. We're actually breaking them. And the non-personal side of breaking them is the principles don't care. If you break them, you're going to get negative results. So our thinking behavior, everything is coming from what's within, right? So as within, so without. And so the change has to begin with me on the inside to change the outward results. And most people think it's the boss, it's the weather, it's whatever the case might be, something outside of them. But when you understand these principles, you realize, and you can see the correlations, just like we can with gravity. And then once you see them, you're like, how did I never see them before? And when you start to put your life in harmony, you see the correlations with the results you're getting. And then you're wondering, why doesn't everybody else see it? It's so obvious, and that's a challenge in itself to not, try to course correct everybody and they think you're crazy.
That's awesome. I love that. And I like the way I mentioned to you before that these principles actually can be quite complex, but you have a way of explaining them that even a taxi driver or a butcher could understand. And my background is in landscape gardening, and I just love the way that you articulate it. I'm able to actually grasp, and you make it something that's intangible, tangible. And so I've been listening to your podcast, and it's just nuggets of gold all the way through, just next level. So I'm up to episode 20, and I've been listening for a week now. So I listen to it 2, 3, 4 times each time, and just amazing. It's been a real revelation for me. One thing that I was thinking, like, if I could ask this author yourself anything about your chapter and about like what I'm sort of going through personally, is how do you actually manage frustration? Like if maybe someone's not getting it, someone on your team, or maybe within myself, if I'm not sort of getting it, how do you actually manage frustration?
Yeah, so if I could maybe get a little philosophical with some of Jim Rohn and some of the Bible, and how in the New Testament he uses the parable of the sower of the seed.
Yeah.
All right, so the sower of the seed is somebody who has good seed. So to me, that would be my business and the value that it's bringing into people's lives, right? That would be the parallel with the seed. And anybody can draw any parallel of anything that you find value with, right? Yeah. So it could be your hobbies, it could be your skills. I mean, even painting, you could look at as a seed in this parable. So the sower, it says he has good seed. So that's something that's of value, something that's going to add value to people's lives. And he's going to go out and sow it, meaning that he's going to plant these seeds. And some of them are going to fall on the wayside, some on very shallow soil, some of them among the rocks, some of them among the weeds, some of them on such hard soil that the birds can come down and just swoop in and take off with that seed, which means it's never going to find root. It's not going to be accepted by somebody else and spring up within them, that value that could have been theirs, right? And then it says that some of the seed will land in good soil, and even in good soil, some are only going to produce 30%, some 60%, and some 100, right? So I don't get frustrated with it, people anymore. Now there's this sower of the seed, which I'll finish this analogy, but also the law of non-resistance. Mm-hmm. The law of non-resistance teaches me that I must not get frustrated, right? Because once I start to behave that way with my thinking, That's breaking the law of non-resistance, which is always going to bring negative results into my life. So you almost kind of have to like live in a fantasy world. Well, you do. You have to live in a fantasy world, but not in a way that it's a fantasy, but you can make the fantasy become a fact. And that's why in The Secret, they use the term Aladdin's lamp. It seems almost magical, but it's really not. There's principles behind it. So with these seeds, when I share the thing that I have of value, my vision and my mission, or even my job, as I share it with other people, the more I create a vision of my life where I'm working with people, like you get very specific on what your vision board is. A lot of people are familiar with vision boards, the things that we would like to have in our lives. Yeah. So the kind of people that I want to work with, I could describe those and I could write those in great detail. Who do I want to be working with? And as I do that, I call that the small how. Like I'm figuring out the smaller how, but the bigger how is who's going to show up in my life. And when you understand these principles, people come from areas that you never even knew existed. So how would I have known that was going to happen? But I did my part, the small h, and the bigger how took care of itself. So who's showing up in my life? If I'm frustrated with them, I attracted that person into my life. So I need to not be frustrated with them. I need to be concerned with my personal growth and development and getting greater clarity on why did I attract that person in my life, which would be a weed that would come up and choke the seed that I'm trying to plant for my life, right? And once I identify that, I have to start to rewire my brain by imprinting on it, you know, the type of person that I would like to be working with. Because, and this is why, it's not that I'm not, like I'm judging that person. Like, let's say it's somebody I share my product and my business with, and they're like the seed that the birds grabbed and flew away with. There's going to be a reason why that person didn't stay around. Like attracts like. Vibrational vibrations or frequencies, you know, they're together. They work together. If there's like oil and water doesn't mix, they're different frequencies on a physics level. Well, as individuals, we're going to work with people that think in like the ways we do in certain areas. Like I could be hanging around people that I resonate with on one level because it's a certain dynamic of my life, but on another level, a business level, I'm not even working with them because they don't resonate with me on that business level, right? So again, going back to your question, when somebody shows up and they're like this with me, I need to figure out what subconsciously attracted that person in my life so I could rewrite that story and pull those weeds out and attract the right people. But the point, and I'm kind of all over the place because like you said earlier before we started, this is a very hard subject to talk and articulate about. Yeah, it is. But I'm not going to be concerned with trying to change that person to meet my needs, right? And the reason I could feel okay about, you know what, I need to let that person be and move on because I'm not going to work. I don't want to work. That person's not going to, unless that person wants to change and resonate at the level I am with that thing that I'm wanting, I can't force them to do that. Jim Rohn says you can only carry one on your back, but try and carry two or three and you can't do it, right? And so I could try and pull that person along and get them to become the person that I'm wanting to be, or I can just work on being that person that I want to be and start attracting people that will match up. And so here's Jesus, who I believe is the greatest teacher ever to live, saying, look, that's just human nature. There's going to be some that don't resonate with you at all. There will be some that resonate with you a little bit, some that resonate more, and some that resonate on a high level. And Jim Rohn says that's just the way it is. That's like, and if you ask why, that would be like asking, why does the sun come up every morning? I just wouldn't go there. Yeah. So for somebody who understands the principles, they're not going to fight that outer experience of people that aren't matching up with their goals and the people that they want to be working with. They go inside and start to figure out, where is the wiring wrong in my self-talk, my feelings, and my expectations. And let's start to create a new concept around that. That'll start to attract the right people to me. Does that make sense? That was a long way around of trying to get to that point.
No, I really appreciated it though. And I think it makes total sense that you're creating the circumstances the way that you want them to be, almost on a fantasy type level. It's that level of dedication and commitment to the paradigm that you're living, your reality. And if things aren't vibrating in sync with your reality, then you take full responsibility and ownership for that, and then you make a course correction so it doesn't.
You have to change the behavior.
Yeah,
you have to change the behavior within, not the other person's behavior. You don't even have control over that. We, as parents, we like to think we have 100% control over our kids. Well, every parent knows you don't. And the only person, and so this would really, be a proof of that we need to be concerned with what's going on in here with our circumstances. The only person we have 100% control over is ourselves. So that ought to be kind of like a tall tale of, oh yeah, that is true. The only person I have control over. But if you don't know the principles, you wouldn't even know that the behavior that you're breaking.
Yeah,
right?
True.
So
And that sense of awareness. Because you're creating deliberately, you know exactly how you want people to vibrate in your reality or how you want people to show up. And when that isn't aligned, then you know that you need to tweak something within yourself.
That's right. Yeah. And that's a discipline. That's a pretty high level discipline. And until you know the principles and the rewards that would come from doing that discipline, you wouldn't put forth the effort, or you'd put it forth for a short time. But when things didn't change as fast as you think they should be changing, then you would give up. That's why I love the study of the principles so much, that's my number one priority. And then that's why I can explain them in a very simplistic way, because I truly do understand them.
You do.
But still,
you've only got to listen to your podcast to get a gauge of that. Wow. So yeah, you really go deep.
But even in explaining them, that's why the podcast, I knew it would be a culmination, like a series, right? So we just recorded number 304 this morning. And I feel like that's the best one. I can't wait for people to get to 304. It's not up yet, but it will be. And it's like destiny, right? That's the title of it, Destiny, and enjoy the journey. But anyway, yeah, it's over time that we can make them more clear. So if I don't have to give you the exact answer to that question right now, but I can spill that out over 4 podcasts, then people listen to it, they listen to it again and again, and all of a sudden they really get what you and I are talking about right
now. Yeah, it's amazing. It's just incredible. And the level of depth that you can go to in this subject matter is awesome. And the analogies that you use are very poignant. In your chapter, there was really a moving towards like taking personal responsibility, and that it actually, I feel that there's a lot of people that feel, maybe unconsciously, I'd say for sure unconsciously, that to be poor or to celebrate poverty rather than actually wealth and a richness monetarily, but also a richness in experience, a richness in relationship, a richness in the form of expression. So how do you actually try and what's your take? I guess, what's your deeper take on the paradigm of wealth versus poverty?
Yeah. I've never really had an issue with wealth, like growing up. But we grew up in a middle class home. My dad was a school teacher. My mom didn't work, but I didn't ever feel like we were in want of anything. Obviously, we didn't live in the big giant mansion. We didn't drive the expensive cars. We didn't have the expensive clothes. We never hardly went out to eat, but we never wanted for anything, and playing sports. And it was just a great upbringing. So I wouldn't say that I had anything against, like, there was nothing built into my paradigm. My parents didn't say, well, rich people are, are evil. They didn't say that. But I see that paradigm out there. Yeah. For sure, it's a real thing that people are dealing with. But I wasn't brought up with the abundant paradigm either, like somebody who's very wealthy and they just were born into wealth and they continue to create wealth throughout their lives. There is no law or principle of scarcity, like of lack. That's not a principle. So if you were to take a spectrum and just take it out and go infinitely both ways, let's take the wealth one, because it could be abundance in anything. Abundance of your own personal health, the abundance of your own personal enthusiasm, these would be their own lines, right? A spectrum of health, a spectrum of relationships, a spectrum of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have the one extreme side, which would be the positive side, where as you go up that positive side, you're going to have greater joy and a more experience of that thing in your life. If you go the other way, it's going to be a lack of those things in your life. So if you get further and further away from the positive side of happiness, the other side of that spectrum is going to be sadness, depression. And so they're on the same line. And as we go up the line, what we're doing is we're putting our lives in harmony with the principle. Mm-hmm. We learn a new thing about that principle, and we start to behave according to that principle. We put our behavior in alignment with what the definition of that particular principle is. And we can learn the depth of these principles and the understanding of them, I would say in this lifetime, on an infinite level. It just will keep progressing. Mm-hmm. And we can progress both ways. So, well, I would say not progress, you would digress going the other way. Mm-hmm. And so going down the opposite side, the negative side, would be a lack of principle. So when people are experiencing poverty, it's because of their not putting their lives in harmony with the principles that produce abundance. It's the same spectrum. So what that should let everybody know is, once you start to understand that you're already on that spectrum, you have the possibility and the capability or the ability to move up that spectrum because you're already on it. It's just a matter of learning the principle and putting your behavior in harmony with it. And so the fact that somebody is experiencing poverty means that they could experience extreme wealth because they're already on that spectrum. They're just lacking the principle or the understanding of it in order to put their life in harmony with it. And that's a hard thing to really understand and comprehend. I think even saying that, you're going to be on two sides of that. There's going to be a gap in between that's just not making connections on what is Dave talking about. So it's an incremental understanding. And when you so like math, I do not do well in math. I had my football coach for math, so I didn't even have to go to class, right? And I just didn't like math. So I could only understand the principles of math probably up to division. Fractions is where I start to lose it, right? But if I could understand, I could definitely learn those principles of calculus and whatever, trigonometry, whatever it goes into. I could learn those principles if I put forth the effort. Yeah. But right now, I couldn't even tell you. There's too much of a gap that I don't even understand trigonometry or geometry or.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Equations, yeah, absolutely. That you need to actually change. Well, it's all about you need to actually get the tools to actually help you expand your level of awareness and consciousness because.
Exactly.
It might have been in the chapter, or it might have even been in one of the podcasts that you mentioned about the levels of thinking. That if you're at a certain level, then a level, if you're, say, at a level 4 out of 10, but you're faced with a level 8 challenge, then it'll just completely overwhelm you. You've got to raise your personal development game, your awareness and understanding of principles. And
that would be like putting me in the math room test lab and giving me calculus. I would completely fail. I wouldn't even know how to begin. Right? But somebody else who knows calculus or trigonometry or is a science major could come in and just ace the test and get an A.
Yeah.
So are we getting A's in every area of our lives, all those different spectrums, our health, our wealth, our time management, our freedom? And I'm telling you, there's a principle on every single one of those spectrums. And it's a great day in everybody's life when we start to get on the path to learning that incrementally. And that's what the podcast is for, is to incrementally give people the opportunity, because I don't know any other forum where somebody's taking these principles. Like, I love Bob Proctor. He was a big influence in my learning. And then the other authors are dead, but I have their books to read. Yeah. But most of them are doing it in a seminar, and it's a weekend thing. And then they graduate you to another program and another program. The podcast is like, it'll forever be going. That we'll have 1,000 podcasts. Right now we're at 304. But I don't know of a program that's put together like that is really committed to giving people the opportunity to be exposed and have the awareness of the principles in a lot of these different important areas.
It's awesome. It really is. It's a great, great tool. And I mean, you really do need to earn the right to actually then move on to another level. And that'll be a direct correlation to the work that you do on yourself for sure. I have a question for you, and it sort of just sprung to mind. You strike me as a really calm person. I was just curious, is there a way that you manage your emotions? It doesn't seem like you get too elated. It doesn't seem like you get too down either. Is there a way, is there a tool, or is there a strategy, or is it just you have such a strong personal development game that you seem very centered and you're emotionally in the way that you show up for things?
Yeah, I think it's just the focus. Like, I'm always focusing on something. I grew up playing sports. Had I known the things I know now, you might be talking to a professional baseball player or a football player, because I would have used laws to be able to accomplish those goals. And there's no question in my mind that I could have. Yeah. And even though I didn't play golf, I could apply these same principles to the game of golf, and I could have became a Tiger Woods. Mm-hmm. That's how Tiger Woods became who he is, through these principles. He may not know them, but he was taught at a very young age to say, his dad taught him, I'm a world-class below par champion golfer, while he was still 6 years old, right? So that was imprinted on him. So that's part of, the law of attraction is a result. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to go do the law of attraction. You can't do the law of attraction. That's a result of living these other principles. So I think it's just the focus. And in sports, I was taught, okay, when you're up to bat, don't just go up there to bat and just think you're going to hit the ball. Watch the ball leave the pitcher's hand, right? And watch and keep your eye on the ball. My dad was my coach, and he just taught me that. And then he would take a rope, drill a hole through a ball and tie it to it and swing it in a circle. And you'd have to try and hit it as he's swinging it in a circle around him like a lasso, right? And so it really took a lot of focus. And then as I graduated to other coaches, one of them said, don't just look at the ball coming out of the hand. Look at the threads. Which way are the threads on the ball spinning? Because that's going to tell you which way the ball's headed. So it was like a real key, because of sports, I think I developed this habit, or maybe I like that challenge of being really focused. And I think we all have certain innate skills that we're born with, and that was maybe one of them for me, or maybe it was developed. I don't know. But focus is something that I'm always in my head focusing on something. And so in doing that, there's not a lot of distraction. I could be distraction. I don't do that perfectly, but because of understanding what I know now, I do it better than I used to.
Yeah.
But I think it's focus and concentration is probably what causes me to not get distracted. But I could tell you, if I'm not in the right, like Bob Proctor calls them, biological rhythms, right? Uh-huh. One day you're happy to see the baby and you want to help the grandma across the street, and all of these different, you're just in such a good mood. And another day is like, so would somebody shut that baby up? And what is grandma doing in the middle of the street, So like when I'm driving down the road, there are times when I react to somebody else's driving, but I try to very quickly correct that and get into that, like you're saying, that more of a response, rather an intelligent response rather than an ignorant reaction. So I do that much better than I used to, for sure, because of understanding the principles. I think that's what gives me that concentrated focus, and just knowing, hey, my life has meaning and I want to contribute. But I'll tell you also, when I take a break, I could take a break better than probably anybody and do absolutely nothing, right? So there's a balance there.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You don't want to be all uptight and focused all the time, but I like that. That's part of my personality. I think people have temperaments, but everybody can still learn how to focus better and concentrate better, and they'll appreciate the fact that they put the effort towards that.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. And another thing that I was wondering, you are the mechanic to millionaire. You're also one of the most humble multi-millionaires that I've met. You just come across as a relaxed, casual, just the next door neighbor just coming over to say hi. And I really appreciate that about your character. And I was just I was curious, and maybe some of the other readers were as well, that how long did it take you to become a millionaire, from being a mechanic working 16 hours, 6 days a week, really just focus on your craft of being a mechanic, to then making that transition, that switch to then becoming like, wow, like there's just so much more to this paradigm, and then becoming a millionaire.
Yeah. What if I could just address the one thing about the humility?
Yeah.
It's because as learning the principles,
Yeah.
they're not my principles. I'm going to say they're God's principles, right?
Yeah.
And so that little H that I know how to do and that I'm in charge of is so insignificant compared to the bigger H that brings that person into my life that I don't even know who they were or where they came from, right? Never even heard of the town they lived in. So the principles and the law of attraction and people think that takes God out of your life. Actually, it's brought me closer to God and understanding who he is and the role that he can play in my life. And so because I know the principles, you could never sever my dependency and my humility from my understanding these. Well, ego could never creep in. Does that make sense? I could never edge God out. I could never become prideful because I know who really is doing the bigger part. Even though my part is essential and I have to do it, it's insignificant compared to that bigger H. So once I started going on the personal development journey and going from that place from where I was praying for God to take my life or help me find a solution, there was a catalyst that happened where I started implementing some of these universal principles without the teacher who got me to do these exercises. He didn't understand the principles to name them, like the law of attraction, the law of non-resistance. This was back in 2005. The movie The Secret wasn't even around then.
That's true.
And so, but he got me to live some principles, right? 5 months later, all the magnificent wins started happening. And in that magnificent win, very quickly, somebody did introduce me to the laws. It was Charles Hannell's The Science of Getting Rich. And that's the same book that Rhonda Byrne read, who did the movie The Secret.
Science of Getting Rich?
The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles.
Wallace Wattles. And then Charles Hamill wrote The Master Key System.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So once I was introduced to Wallace Wattles, that opened me up to these principles that I had never heard of before, which then led to Bob Proctor and Charles Hannell. And then I was like, where have these things been my whole life? And they're in the Bible. They're just kind of watered down, right? So that journey, I replaced my income as a mechanic in 4.5 months. So that was pretty fast. People said, well, how did you do that? You know, I was a mechanic, and now here in the networking industry, I replaced my income in 4.5 months, and now I'm doing it full time. And people would say, well, how'd you do that? And I'd say, well, I learned how to think. And I'd start to try to explain to them, and they would go like, oh, you're not going to tell me. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you. You know?
Oh my God.
So as I was learning how to think better and governing my behavior, because knowing the principle and living it is two different things. So I was incrementally adjusting my behavior. And when I replaced my income, I still hit some plateaus. But I would work on myself every morning. I made the number one priority my personal development and my self-governing behavior on thinking. Mm-hmm. So I would incrementally move forward. Then at 13 months, I had a 6-figure income, which in this industry, that's phenomenal, especially without any
13 months. 13 months, was it?
13 months hit a 6-figure income, right? And it wasn't like a huge jump. Like at first, it was just me and my wife getting dinner and a movie. That was my first goal. And then people see now we live in the house, we drive the cars and all that, but it wasn't a jump. It was my thinking had changed. It started producing better results. And now I could pay for new tires on my car, my old jalopy that had over 300,000 miles on it. Instead of buying used tires, instead of buying brand new tires, instead of buying used tires for like $25, I was now buying new tires for the old jalopy. I didn't go right into the new car. Yeah. And it wasn't a whole new wardrobe for me and my kids. It was now, okay, we could get some new shoes. We'll still get the Goodwill and the hand-me-down clothes, but at least you're wearing brand new shoes that you would like to wear. You see, and then it became dinner and a movie, and then dinner 2 times a week, and then 3 times a week. And I would hit plateaus, which just meant I needed to work harder here. So I spent more time on myself than I did on my daily methods of operation with my business. I still did the daily methods of operation, but I made sure I got here first. Mm-hmm. And then, so in 13 months, hit a 6-figure income. It took 6 years to hit my first million. And then 3 years to hit the second million, 1 year to hit the third million. And now it's over $1 million a year. So in 13 years of being on this journey, we're coming up on $10 million. And that's because I've not stopped here. If I would have, even now, I would plateau with where I'm at because I need to rechange the concept of my thinking to get to 2 million a year, 3 million a year, 4 million a year, which will then be more million than I've been on this journey, right? The years that I've been on the journey. But I've been committed, and I still do the same things that I did back when it was $50 a week that I made, or $100 a week in this new business. It's not the methods that need to change. What needs to change is here. So people will say, well, I'm going to do what this new person who's being spotlighted in the company's doing. What is she doing? Because what I'm doing and what Dave told me to do isn't working. Well, it's because they didn't change here. I have not changed my methods. I might hit a plateau for 2 years where I'm making $800,000 a year, but it's not the method. It's what's going on here as I'm doing that method. So let me just say this again, loud and clear. What methods I was doing at $100 a week is the same methods I'm doing at $21,000 a week. And I was just listening in a seminar that we had with our company. The guy's last name is Hardy. I can't remember his first name, but it's the compound effect. And what was he was saying? Dana, now I just lost because I was trying to remember his name. It was like the founders of Google and Facebook and Steve Jobs, the things that they do today that have made them so famous and wealthy and everything else are the same things they did when they were working out of the garage. And then it's that compound effect of doing those things, but you got to be thinking in the right way as you're doing those things to have the compound effect literally work for you. Because there are people who do the right things, but they're not getting the results like Steve Jobs did, right? Does that make sense? So I threw a couple of things in there in a hodgepodge based on what you asked, but I could speed it up. And if I could discipline my behavior faster than I am now with the new concept of myself, my business would just launch and all of a sudden I'd be in the spotlight again. And in fact, I've really committed to that behavior change, really committed to it again, because you can get complacent at $1 million a year. I mean, it's you have to find things to you at that point, right?
Yeah.
Because it's passive, it just keeps coming in. I really did that about 2 years ago. And 2 years of committing to that, some of my dream board vision people have showed up, and I'll be in the spotlight again with the company because of the growth that's about to happen. But it goes back to me really committing to that level of working on it right here.
Amazing. I just love it. You just got such a great story, and I like that it's actually gradual, but there's just this underlining drive and commitment. I'm sure, even through the plateaus that you've just dug a little bit deeper, or you've looked for another resource, or you just seem like the type of person that would just change it up a little bit. Maybe you would just take a break and just not do anything for a week and then come back bigger, fresher than ever. And I think that there's that relentlessness and that pursuit. It's just this, you seem to have this hunger and the pursuit to expand and expand and expand. And I believe that that's in harmony with the universe, with God.
That's the number one law of the universe is progress.
Yeah.
We're not happy unless we're progressing.
Yeah. And you strive for excellence in everything you do. I mean, before this interview, you were making sure the light was absolutely as perfect as you could get it. And you just demonstrate that in everything that you do. I mean, we were filming at your house. Your wife's in a film that I produced, and you were looking for everything just to be perfect. There's excellence in everything you do. When you make a shake, it's like, it's got to be excellence. Like, no little powder at the bottom at all. It's just, it's in everything you do. And I think that's a habit. That's a habit that just serves you.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
So I have a granite rock that has a saying etched into it from Vince Lombardi, and some people may not know him, but he was the coach for the Green Bay Packers, one of the winningest teams of all time, and considered one of the greatest coaches. He says that the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence, right? And so here's the thing, though. Before learning the principles of thinking and that behavior, I still put excellence in everything. Like, I don't know where I came up with it, but it's just like, I pretend like somebody's watching me, and I want to impress the person that's watching me, whether I'm vacuuming the house or I'm washing the car or whatever the case might be, right? And so, but I was very frustrated. Remember, I was praying for God to take my life, even though I was putting excellence into every method of things that I was doing, the strategies we might call them. That's a frustrating place to be. That's why I just thought, you know what, I just want to die and go to heaven, because I'm not going to feel like this anymore. I'm not going to be tired. I'm not going to feel drained. I'm not going to feel unfulfilled. And I just felt like, well, you got to go to heaven to feel that way, right? So once I learned the principles and I matched them with the excellence and the work ethic, and now I'm putting that same work ethic into up here, man, it was what launched. It's the 1%er results, right? Where now here I am, a multi-millionaire before even 50 years old. And the income that I make in networking, Eric Worre said there's only about 500 people in the world that do that. Well, it was a perfect storm, but it was a lot of pain to go through to get to that perfect storm. And that should give everybody hope that if I could do it, and I was at that place, if I'm willing to work hard, and I'm willing to work hard in both areas, the personal development and learning the right principles and getting that work ethic there, everybody else could have the same results by law. There's nobody that could step in. There's not a boss that could step in. Once you start learning those principles, if you have a boss that's holding you back right now, that boss will disappear from your life. I don't know how, that's the bigger H. But you just have to know that those circumstances will change and those people will leave from your life and you'll start to have these wins. Anybody can do that. To me, that's like part of my passion now is not just my business and creating health and financial freedom for people, but getting them to move their lives forward to go from one magnificent win to the next, be, progressively moving towards their worthy ideal is what Napoleon Hill says.
I love that. It's awesome. I think it's also said in The Stranger's Secret, Earl Nightingale, that, a goal is progression towards a worthwhile ideal. He mentions that.
Yeah, actually, it was Earl Nightingale that I was quoting.
Earl Nightingale, yeah. Well, Napoleon Hill was mentored by Earl Nightingale.
Yeah.
Napoleon Hill then mentored Bob Proctor.
Yeah. All this stuff just comes around, right?
The lineage is just incredible. And so who really has been the mentor that really has guided you? Wayne Dyer had Abraham Maslow as a guiding mentor. Who's been the one for you? Has it been in the book?
It's been dead authors.
Yeah.
Dead authors.
Yeah.
I would say Bob Proctor was a huge influence, though. Listening to those audios, I've never been to a live seminar of his, but I've invested in one program that he had. It was called Working with the Law. And then it's just been his books and his CDs, YouTube. But the other books, I would say The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace Wattles, and then Charles Handel, The Master Key System. I read those books over and over. And see, the thing is, why could those be the mentor for me so effectively? Like on our podcast this morning, we read 2 sentences from Charles Handel's book, and we spent 45 minutes talking about that. Just 2 sentences. That's how I read a book. I don't read a book my goal is not to read from the front to the back. In fact, many times I'll just go to different areas of those books over and over and over. I'm not going to read it from the beginning to the end because there's a lot of things in there that don't pertain to what I'm needing right now, right? And there's some books that I've never finished, but they've changed my life.
Wow.
Because you get that little nugget that you needed and you really drive it deep. I want to learn that principle that author's trying to get across in a few words, which is really limiting. You've got to tap into the spiritual message, what's in that sentence. So I do not read books fast. I don't want to take speed reading book courses because I don't want to get through the books fast. I want to hang on a paragraph for 2 weeks. So that's
epic.
That's the mentorship.
You have an insatiable diet for consumption of just quality content, and it really comes across in everything that you do, and in your chapter. And of course, people can read your chapter. It's still 99 cents, by the way. Today is actually the last day where people can get it for 99 cents. All the proceeds are going to the Bali Street Kids Foundation. I've got so many different things I could just keep talking to you and talking to you that I'd like to ask. There was one thing that I just want to clarify. Are you saying there was different phrases you've kind of said a number of times now, and I'm not exactly sure what you've said. Is it that there is a bigger edge or there's a bigger age?
H. how. So capital H in how, and a lowercase h in how. So the lowercase h, the smaller part, is me learning the principles and adjusting my behavior to them. That's going to attract incredible results into my life. Kind of like the Aladdin's lamp, right? And God, the author of the laws and the principle of cause and effect and progress and all of that, is going to bring those into my life when I do my small part. See, my finite mind, let me give you an example. As I was setting a goal on a financial goal for my business, because it's a barometer of how much impact I'm making in people's lives. How much money, the more money I make, the more impact I've made of quality value in other people's lives. So I set this goal, and I did some pictures around it. I did some graphing that really resonated with me to imprint that on to the new concept of myself. And as I did that, it didn't take long, probably a couple weeks. And some strangers that I didn't know from a town that I had never heard of called me and said they wanted to partner up with me, that they had found me on the internet. Now, if I was going to try and go after doing the strategies to make that happen, how would I do that? There's no way I would even know what actions to take physically to get those right people to show up, because those two people, a couple, literally reached my goal in about probably 6 to 8 months. Because once they partner up with me, I started progressively moving in the physical world towards that goal that I had on the card, right? So I call that a divine connection, because my finite mind could not have known that web that was weaved for them to do whatever they did to find me and then call me. There's no way I could have scripted that out and said, okay, now let's go do that. But I did know the part that I did know how to do, guarding my focus with my life around the new concept of myself. And then doing the work, the behavior every day, all day long, to be in harmony with that new behavior that would bring that new circumstance. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
totally.
Them coming, I didn't have control over that. I don't know how that works on the quantum level, but I just know that they did show up. And so that's the bigger H, that's God.
That's the bigger H. That's what you're saying, the bigger H.
Or the how. How's the good? Because what most people do when they set their goals is how am I going to do that?
Yeah, totally. That's a horrible place to get caught in.
That's breaking the law.
That's a no man's land. Don't go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
The big H is none of your business. The moment you start to think, how is that going to happen? It causes you to break the law of non-resistance, which is going to produce negative results.
I thought you were saying the bigger edge. I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean like there's something that expands beyond that? I'm like, well, I guess it does. Yeah.
Well,
the bigger H. Okay, cool. I'm glad I clarified that point. The how. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And I just wanted to ask you, I know I'm just mindful of your time. I know we've been chatting now for just over a little bit under an hour. But I wanted to really ask you this question. And I think everyone watching will like the answer as well. And if you knew you only had 6 months left to live, just say, hopefully you're old and grey and you're 98 on the porch, but you still had a lot of energy for 6 months, what would you do? Like, how would you like to spend that time?
Same way I am now. It wouldn't change. I have some presentations that I'm set up to do. I would probably fit a vacation or two in there, some little quick getaways, but it would still just be doing what I'm doing now, because when I die, it doesn't, like the way I look at death is when I travel to a new area and I don't know what that area is like, but I bring everything with me and I just continue to behave the way that I'm behaving in the area that I do know. Right.
Wow.
So it's just going to be a progress. It'll be like me jumping on a plane and going to another city and doing what I do. That's how I look at it. So, I mean, why would I not want to continue to do what I love doing? I'm doing what I love doing. I don't look at it as work. I'm not uptight. I'm not stressed. I set goals, but I don't get stressed about them. I don't put a date on them. It's just happily achieving. Right? Instead of stressfully being the overstressed achiever. And when I need a break in that 6 months, if I need a break, I could unplug and not feel guilty about it.
And of course, you take the whole family, and you've pretty much got a baseball team now. So everyone goes with you.
We're working on a football team.
You guys, that's awesome. I just love the family dynamic that you guys have, and
look at our kids have grown up around this now for the last 13 years. They're doing some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
They're doing things and accomplishing goals, and they get it, and there's still challenges for them, but they know when they're going off track up here.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get text. We have a family text. It's a cool thing. Everybody should have a family text where everybody's in that text and everybody's just having conversations and checking in with each other every day. And
that's cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. And you could do that with a mastermind where you're holding other people accountable. But yeah, we have a lot of fun. And our kids are, again, we're not stressed out. We're not like trying to be a machine. We're following the pathway that gives us the most joy, and we're achieving.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great combination. And it didn't happen overnight. You've developed it and you refined it. Perfection is just, it's not a worthwhile ideal, actually. I think it's more progress that's the universal law that you're talking about, is to focus on progress. And that's what I share with the authors that I work with that need a little bit extra support, is to focus on the progression, the unfolding of the chapter, rather than actually striving for perfection, because that's not a good place to be in. It's the progress, it's the progression. And then add to that the refining it, course correction. And I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone that does it to that level of detail and accuracy that you do it. It's quite phenomenal. So it was really an honor to collaborate with you, Dave, and have you in this book.
I loved it. It's been an honor for me too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. We're trying for a while to get you on board. Actually, Casey, I think, asked you. She said she asked you last year, but you just had so many other things going on, and you really had to. I think you were launching your own book, and so people can get that now, can't they? Because they can get The Journey of Riches, Finding Inspiration, which is the book that we collaborate on together. Then you also have another book that you did earlier.
It's a workbook that goes along with a program that we do about 3 times a year. In fact, we're going to do it again, where it's 30 days every morning on a conference call, which is recorded. But you can't just buy that book because you wouldn't really understand the exercises in it.
Okay.
But yeah, we have a lot of fun doing that, and it's very fulfilling as well. Yeah.
So when's your standalone book going to come out, like the independent release, like your take on the principles?
I don't know. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity, because I want people to be exposed so that they can get the awareness.
Yeah.
And, your book is going to do that in a big way. The podcast, it's all been word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for the podcast, and it's the value that people are sharing with other people. So I really appreciate you and the stature and, reputation that you have, and giving me the opportunity, because I don't have plans. Like, I would love to do a book. The problem with me with doing a book is I always want to just keep expanding it. You go back and think it, you're like, it's like the podcast. 7 years later, we'll have a book this thick, and it still hasn't been released. I think what I would like to do.
Think series.
Exactly. I think what I would like to do is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like Think and Grow Rich, or not Think and Grow Rich. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Yeah. It's just a little tiny book of about 24 pages, but it's like 4 by 4 inches, right? And I kind of like that, and just thinking of doing a series of something like that would be ideal. Maybe, doing like that chapter for you. I love that. And then following that with another chapter or something like that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, definitely love to collaborate with you again. It was an awesome experience. And, I know the readers are going to get a lot of value from reading your chapter. And then if they follow you and go on and follow your podcast, I know their life will only get better.
That's kind of my rationalization on a book is, hey, the podcast is there and it's better than any book I could write, What's up?
I think it's good to be able to consume in different ways content. A book that, there's something about words. There just is an essence, and you should just, it's just a different way of connecting in with the content that I find. I like the audio way of connecting as well. Then I like to read also and then highlight.
You just reminded me, we did put the podcast into
Oh,
word form. It's podcast 1 through 16. I totally forgot until you said that.
wow, okay.
And it's sitting right here, and this is available on Amazon for like $5 or something like that.
Okay, awesome.
But it's the first 16 podcasts. My daughter typed it up and she did an awesome job with it.
That's
but
amazing.
yeah, I have never gone back and listened to my podcast. I just don't like doing that.
Okay.
But I actually read like the first couple of them in here, and it hits you in such a different way that I actually enjoyed reading it where I would not enjoy listening to my voice,
Yeah. And you take it in differently. I find that, when you're studying something and you're just sitting with it, your own thoughts, consuming a podcast is also excellent because you can consume it everywhere, and it can really just help you align your focus to the right thinking that's going to get the results that you desire. And that whole thing about guarding your focus, especially when you're just doing it, you're new to it, and like anything, most of the time it's like what you don't want really appears its head first, and then you can sort of refine that and actually then come up with your own strategy of like, well, how do I need to course correct? And so your podcast is really helping me in areas that I need to sort of just tweak a little bit and just monitor what I'm actually putting into my consciousness.
Yeah, one of the things that might help people too as they begin this journey, it really helped me, was that it was Bob Proctor who said it. He said, for a time when you begin, it'll look like you're going backwards. Because what's happening is you're unraveling the mess that we've created in our lives through all the reactions. And so it'll look like you're going backwards. It did for me. And it was very frustrating. I almost like threw in the towel on the business that actually we enjoy today and has brought so much abundance and everything. And there was a time where I thought about going back to mechanicking because of that whole pain that goes through the personal growth process, right? Like, here I grow again, right? And so just know that, you guys, as you embark on this journey, it will seem for a moment, and Bob said it has to happen by law. It'll seem like things are going backwards for a time, but just stick with it. So that's great advice, great wisdom.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate that. And there's just so many layers to this, but definitely to push through it and to give yourself a break as well as you're going through it, and to be gracious to yourself. And if you're having a moment of a meltdown, go get a massage or just break that.
I get lots of massages every week. I do at least an hour massage.
Awesome. That's so good. Yeah.
There was something else I was going to just say, like with that. I like the term, instead of I need to change, I need to evolve. Just look at it as a point. I'm going to learn some things proactively, and I don't need to change because I'm bad, because that's kind of the connotation of you got to change because you're not doing it right. Look at it as I'm just going to take a proactive, like kind of that laid back attitude. I'm going to take a proactive measure of taking so much time every day of just learning something new with these principles, and then start applying them and evolve my life forward on that spectrum with no pressure. And evolving just means, I've decided I'm going to choose to take a proactive stance at learning things, and then starting to learn how to govern my behavior based on those things I learned. Not I need to change and be something different than I am now. That's not the case. It's an evolving process, like you said,
I like that. I think that's awesome. It's just basically
a more gentle approach on ourselves.
Yeah, I like that. And it's gives yourself a break and enables you to ease into that, and it makes it more enjoyable, I think, to evolve. Awesome, Dave. Great to chat with you. And people can listen to this over and over again. I suggest that you do. There's nuggets of wisdom that you shared. It's just awesome. And, of course, on your podcast. And then the book, just to dovetail that as well. So Finding Inspiration, Journey of Riches, Finding Inspiration, 11 stories that will ignite your soul. It really is such a level of depth that you shared is just awesome. And the other authors as well. Really is a great read, and many different perspectives on the one thing, which is refreshing for people. And they can just pick anywhere in the book and choose, and they don't feel like they've missed anything. So it's really a valuable tool for people to utilize. But awesome. Thank you so much. I acknowledge and appreciate you, Dave. Thank you so much for the work that you do and continue to do. And I'll be catching up on all your podcasts, brother, currently up to 020. So Uh,
Thank you, John. Thank you for all that you're doing too. I could say everything right back at you. So thank you.
awesome. Thanks again, Dave.
Okay.